And as you may have heard, I'm on Unama'gi, also known as Cape Breton, in the community of Glace Bay, and I'm part of the Atlantic Canada Coordinating Committee for Kairos. And I really want to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming tonight. It's really wonderful to have you as part of this, this conversation. Now, at this time, I'm going to invite Ada Ogbe from another member of the Coordinating Committee from Development and Peace to offer a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Alison. I feel privileged to lead in this. I would like to acknowledge that I live and work in Halifax in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, whose ancestors have been living in this area for thousands of years. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. I know there are people who are joining from different places. I invite you to use the chat box to recognize the territory in which you are joining from. And also to, in the chat box, Shannon will put a link in case you are not sure where you are joining from, so that you could just type your location and search, and automatically it's going to pop out the territory. Thank you. While you're doing that, Alison, you can continue with that.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much, Ada. We'll just allow just a few seconds for folks to do that. And you can certainly continue to do that just for another minute. We do want to offer a very warm welcome to everyone here tonight, and I'm going to invite another member of the Coordinating Committee, Elizabeth Heater, to offer a welcome to you all.
Thank you, Alison, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic Region Living Treaties gathering. A special welcome, I would like to make a special welcome to the Ilnu women of the Wabanaki and the women of the First Light, who are a circle of women who are going to share with us as we learn together. We've come together this evening and tomorrow morning to explore and strengthen how we live into the treaties and how the treaties live in us. We've come together to listen to each other with respect and with openness. I invite each of us to take a moment to bring yourself to being here now, to let go of whatever else you may have done today, that's done. And to hold ourselves to come together this evening with open hearts and open minds. And I'd like to just share with you a little opening piece that we can, and then following that, Shannon, if you could play, where I invite us to sit and listen to a song that's called Welcome to the Circle. But before we do that, I would like to just offer this as an opening for us and a welcome. We are here. Here we are right here, right now, open.
Welcome to this circle where love and grace abound. We honor your journey, and wherever you are bound, we will walk beside you, encourage you on your way, celebrate your spirit, and hold you as we pray. There is love, one like you. There is grace enough to see you through. And wherever you have walked, whatever path you choose, may you know there is love for one like you. Welcome to this circle where love and grace abound. Honor your journey, and wherever you are bound, we'll walk beside you, encourage you on your way, celebrate your spirit, and hold you as we pray. There is love for one like you. There is grace enough to see you through. And wherever you have walked, whatever path you choose, may you know there is love for one like you. And wherever you have walked, whatever path you choose, may you know there is love for one like you.
Thank you. And I invite us all to be open to hear and to be challenged to perhaps go from this gathering with something new. We learn about ourselves, our thoughts, and our relationships. Sorry.
No, thank you, Elizabeth. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off at all.
I am finished now.
Actually, I know, very sincere thanks for that. And actually, I'm wondering if either you or Shannon might put a link to that song in the chat. Just noticing some folks had appreciated that very much. So I had mentioned tonight, a lot of our time will be focused on listening. And I'd like to invite another member of the coordinating committee, Lidvald Haagenstrand, to share a few words or thoughts about that.
When we go into the forest, As we walk away from other people, the business of life, we find a place that's peaceful. And often we come to a lake, a big round place with water and sometimes plants growing in it. And as we stand there, the wind begins to ruffle the waters. We hear the wind, we feel it, it touches our hearts. And as we stand there in that circle of surrounded by trees where the water is, we are at peace. Today we are to create a circle, a place of peace. When you think of a bowl, what makes it useful is the fact that it's hollowed out and empty. So when we come together, we take the time to relax, to welcome one another, to be prepared to be surprised, to set aside our previous agendas so that we can truly hear what is being said. For some of us, it might be shame, it might be confusion, for others, hurt. But we all bring that into the circle and we allow it to become looser and looser and fall away so that we can see the water ripple in conversation. And so we take time to listen, to be with one another. I've been asked to mention that take the time to write down a word or a short phrase about what does treaty mean to you. And we use that as a basis for some of the discussions tomorrow.
So we're going to invite everyone to write in the chat box just one word or image that comes to mind when you think of treaty. We are certainly no rush. If folks have a word to add, it would be appreciated. I think we're going to kind of create a word cloud from these words shortly. We are preparing now to move into the circle for the rest of us, a time of listening. Elizabeth has warmly welcomed the members of the circle. I want to add my welcome and thanks. It's so greatly appreciated, your willingness to join us tonight. We're very much looking forward to listening and learning together. So just a reminder to those who are listening, please make sure your microphone is on mute, and you may also want to turn off your camera, especially if there seems to be any problems with the internet, just the bandwidth, I guess, or the ability to hear and see everyone who's taking part in the circle. And I believe the members of the circle will introduce themselves and will open their circle. So with very warm thanks, I'm going to turn to Miigam'agan.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, I think Gisatanamok had to log out downstairs. So Allison, Shannon, are you asking me to introduce our group? How's our circle starting? Okay.
Great.
So,
thank you.
okay. So, Nina na jagech lea wiskanu village. Like iskuk mopiadiek veidayek, mopiadiek ebidewutiek lea wutiek mokobiutiek maulugurutiek na delwi del nenasutiek which women are first. Ancestral language, my mother tongue. I've introduced myself, and I'm very grateful for the invitation from Kairos. And I am especially grateful for my sisters and nieces who are here with us tonight. I know that they're very big. So I thank you for all coming, being part of the circle. So again, my name is Miigam'agan, and my totem is Juggetch, lobster. I'm from a community, grew up in a community in Escanawabaditch, and I know myself as a Nuist, and I want to maybe pass this over to Lisa and invite her to do our song, welcoming song, as we begin our circle. So Lisa.
Hey, Waliwan, Miigam'agan. Good to see you this evening. Wait, see that when. Nildali is Lisa Perley Dutcher, no J O Nil Negutguk. Naganil wig Wulustagawig. Yudskit Gamik. I will sing a song of welcome for you, and I'm just introducing myself. And where I'm from is from Negutguk, which is Tobik First Nation, and I live here I live on Wulustug territory or Wulustug land, and yeah, I'm going to sing you a welcome song. Guano de, 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 hey, guano de, guano de, hey, guano de, guano de, hey, guano de, ay, guano de, hey, guano de, ay, yokio, yokio, ay, yokio, hey, guano de, oh, hey, guano de, 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 oh. Welcome, everyone.
So I'm going to invite us to go around the circle and introduce ourselves. And then the next circle will be about our thoughts about the topic that we're here. The two questions are when we begin the next round, I'll reread the questions. Okay, so in my screen, I can see Kiana and Brittany.
I could go first.
Okay.
Gwen and Deloise, Brittany Lynn Gray. I am from Papineau First Nations. I am currently residing in Fredericton on Wolastoqey territory. I am also the founder and director of Project AIR, Ancestral Indigenous Roots. And I'm also currently studying Indigenous counseling at UMB. But other than that, that's who I am.
Quinn and Eloise, Kiana Kingbird. My name is Kiana. I live in Esconobridge. I'm actually just down the road from Miigam'agan. I'm a project manager with the climate change and flood risk modeling adaptation here in our community. And this is actually new for me. And I previously have been working with the John Howard Society for community engagement here. So I'm just really involved with community engagement. That's what my bread and butter, I guess you could say, the things that I really enjoy in life. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Winnie Odo. I live in the most easterly part of Lingayen in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, in the land of the Mi'kmaq. And I'm happy to be with you tonight.
Okay, Ishbel, thank you,
Sure.
Winnie.
So I'm Ishbel, and I live in Tatamagouche, and am coordinator for Women of First Light and Abijiwalo Malutanij. I'm Gutchamanese, in that my people came from the Highlands of Scotland a long time ago. And my clan from Scotland is the Eagle. And the name that I was given by Creator is First Light in Darkness. And I'll leave it at that for the first round.
Thank you, Ish. And Juliana?
Yeah, Kwe, everyone. Nandela was in Juliana Bielfall. I'm from Miigam'agan Mi'kmaq Nation in New Brunswick. I'm very grateful to be here to speak. I'm currently working at MB Power as a cybersecurity intern, and I have passions for storytelling and oral history. So I'm very grateful to be able to share with everyone today. Walio.
Okay, so Kathy Martin wasn't able to join us, and we had an acknowledging of her loss of her mother today. So we did the moment of silence and sending prayer and love to Kathy and her family. And as well, Jane wasn't able to join us, Jane Meter. So I think there's 6 of us now. There's Lisa, myself, Brittany, Kiana, Ishbel, and Juliana. So we wanted to begin the next circle of responding to the questions. And because I've been cut off a few times, maybe does anyone have the questions right there so we can respond?
I think the question was just around the treaties and living into the treaties, and what do the treaties actually mean and how do we live them?
Oh, yes, thanks.
Well, yes, I don't mind starting off. And I just like the title of the discussion, Living Treaties, and it kind of speaks so well to the treaties and how we see them as they're still living. They're not something of ancient times that are sitting in an archive somewhere. I think they're something that has always been there for us, that our ancestors, went into relationship with the settlers. And, they saw that they could potentially have, a relationship with the settlers, and they wanted to have like peace and friendship with them. And I think this is something that our people understood, I think, for a long time. And I think that necessarily hasn't been our experience with the settlers, unfortunately, but it is something that I, as I've become more aware of the treaties, and I guess we kind of always understood that we were sharing land and resources with people in a peaceful way. and we were not relinquishing, we were not, giving up any of our rights to access the land and the resources, our people. Watched my grandparents and my uncles and my aunties going out to fish and hunt and do all the things that, they felt that they had every right to do. And I think that stemmed from those treaties that they understood. So, to me, it's been very much alive as far as our perspective. And I think, it's only coming to light for many others, I think, now, in terms of looking at, examining the relationship and what our relationship is based on with settler society. And I think that's, it's a good place to start. I think when we're starting to, walk in circles together again and wanting to engage in better relations with one another, is to re-examine and to look at, what are our peace and friendship treaties about here in this territory and this land. And so to me, it is about, like, I saw that a lot of people had posted about, a relationship. And I also, that's the first thing that came to my mind too, when I thought about treaties. And however, like I said, that doesn't seem to be what our past history has been about. But I'm hopeful that, by having discussions like this, it will lead us to examine how things can be better with our relationship. And, I think being able to exercise our treaties, I think there's been a lot of maneuvering by certain stakeholders or I guess government officials, I will say it, that, they do not want us to be exercising our rights. Now, even from my own community, we're not able to go and fish in our own rivers. Like, to me, that's, there's something that's not right there when we've already had an understanding already that, we would be able to always be able to do that. And we would also be able to live peacefully. But it takes both sides. And I think that, to me, it's like, is whose responsibility is it to teach about this? I think it's something that didn't get taught in an educational system, in the school system or whatever. I think they're trying to make some effort to do that now, which is great. But I think we still have, like, there's a responsibility for all of us, like me as a mom, me as a grandma, to pass that on to my children, to ensure that they remain living and that the story continues to be told about them. And I think that's kind of our responsibility, and as settlers' responsibility as well, is to, you can't wait for Indigenous people to educate you. It's your responsibility to educate yourselves. And I think that's a really important piece of allyship, to show allyship, is to take the initiative to learn, to pick up the documents and to have the discussions, to have the relationships with people, that you learn more about us and our treaties and our relationships, and like, to make it a better experience in the future. I don't want to go on too long, but I think that's kind of, in a nutshell, my thoughts around my initial thoughts around how we live into the treaties and how treaties live in us, is that, we have to keep that story alive. We have to make it our responsibility to exercise our rights, but also to pass that knowledge on to our children. So I'm
I know this was a conversation. For me, I've been thinking about this, and it takes me to all the emotional experiences. Treaties. I could say this is fighting words, kind of from my experience. But so I really appreciate Lisa, and I appreciate the people, Kairos, and the ones who've come here to sit in circle to have a discussion on what this all means to us. So it's for me, today most of us draw on references.
I think we might have lost Miigam'agan.
We did. We just lost Mig.
Did somebody else want to?
I don't mind going ahead.
Great. Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah, no worries. So treaties is kind of a new topic for me. I've been reconnecting to my culture for about 1.5 years now. So I guess I kind of have some fresh eyes when talking about treaties. And I guess like my understanding, it's supposed to be a mutual agreement, and we talk about relationships. And when I think in the context of this relationship, we want it to be reciprocal, just like our relationship to the land and our relationship to our friends and our family. We would have the expectancy that this type of agreement, we would have this equal responsibility between the two parties, between two sovereign nations. But, the intention versus the reality are two completely different things. A very prime example, I was never taught treaties in public education. I was never taught treaties at all in my university experience, and I've been in university for 5 years. And I find like, if that doesn't speak volumes, I don't really know what else would. So keeping in mind that like, if we're not getting it from the education systems, where are we going to learn about treaties when it's both Indigenous and non-Indigenous responsibilities to be upholding those agreements that we made so many years ago, and that are supposed to be living within us, and they're supposed to be ongoing? I find that blows my mind while coming into culture. And it also begs the question, well, who's supposed to teach these teachings? Where are we supposed to get the information? Where are we supposed to be educated? And I like what Lisa was saying, where, it's the equal responsibility. Like, me as an Indigenous person, like, I will educate my kids someday. I will actively want to talk about it with my peers. And I feel like it's only right that non-Indigenous people would like to do that as well within their own spaces. And it gives them, again, like all of us, a sense of responsibility. Like, we're all responsible as treaty people to be having these conversations and to be educating one another. So that's like my initial take on just like treaties as a whole. But again, where like the intention and the actual action, there's such a lack in education. And there needs to be something, not that there even needs to be more, but there needs to be a beginning start. I'm glad to hear that, Lisa, you were saying that there are starting to have classes, and I think that's wonderful, but I still think, we need to like excel that a lot more, because even when I was in high school, I didn't learn anything about my culture at all. Like, it's really sad. And, it's not a question to wonder why the government isn't making it a priority for us to be educated on treaties, let alone the entirety of our culture. And I mean, that's just truth. If you guys know the history, and if not, it's a really good time to be here to start being educated. And like I said, I'll admit, like, I don't know much about treaties, but I'm starting, and that's all you can really ask, is for you to start looking into it. More specifically, when we talk about the questions for tonight, So how do we live in treaties? For me personally, like, this is practicing my culture. This is learning my language. This is me learning and practicing my spirituality and sharing these things with the people in my space. Self-governance is like another thing that I'm beginning to have interests in, and I know that's also falls along within the treaties. But again, when thinking about self-governance and treaties, the whole reasons why we have treaties is because we are two sovereign nations making an agreement, but we don't practice our life as a sovereign nation, which I think is, again, really interesting to think about when speaking about treaties and reflecting on treaties. And I'll leave like that kind of part there. And then second part of that question, like, how do treaties live in us? I feel like for all of us, it's been there intergenerationally. For me, I feel like it's been there unconsciously. But to bridge that gap between, you know, how do I say that? I think there's a difference between how treaties live within all of us, like they do, but I think there's a difference between it like consciously being in your life and then unconsciously allowing it to be in your life. So I feel like I'm coming out of that unconscious bit and slipping into being more conscious about, okay, I'm aware that there's treaties now. Now I need to learn what they are, and I need to learn how I can practice these in my everyday life so I then can educate others and have these conversations and, you know, be a more active treaty person. But I'll leave it there for now, guys. But that's just a little bit of what I'm thinking so far for this first round. Alalin.
Okay, so Kiana, would you be able to go next?
Hi. When I think of, living in the treaties and the treaties living in us, I have a little bit of a different experience from Brittany. It's funny, when I think about treaties, my first real exposure to them that I could recall is in grade 5. I think it was the science fair or the project fairs that you do, and all I did for mine was I took a bunch of posters of our treaties that we had, and I tacked them up onto a Bristol board, and I had my moccasins. And I remember when the teachers came by and they asked me about the treaties, I was looking at them and I was trying to read them real quick, and I was like, fish. And I really didn't have any idea, what they meant. So, even if you are exposed to them at a young age, it doesn't really give you, a head start or anything, because I had to really kind of, do background research on treaties as well. And I still feel like it's like an eel, you think you have a grasp on it and then it slips away. But when I think about living in treaties and the treaties living in us, I'm gonna just tell stories, I guess, instead of my speaking more clearly. But when I think of living in treaties, I think of a time, actually, I think it was around last year, whenever we were witnessing the treaty rights being infringed upon us so intensely out in Digby. And I was watching someone's lives, like the live streams, and I remember being so upset. Like, I could even feel it in my voice now, the anger I felt at the time. This is something that it's an inherent right that we have, and we're all witnessing it being taken away from us, and just feeling so powerless in that moment. But in that moment, I was also I was helping Ishbel and Miigam'agan with some canning. So we were sitting there and we're cutting vegetables, and they were very peaceful and calm at the time. And I remember just being so angry and trying to, suppress that feeling, and going home that night and just feeling exhausted, like, as if I'd been there myself. My body was physically tired. And I think that, that's an example of the ways that treaties, they are physically, a part of us. We physically feel, a physiological reaction, I guess, to feeling like a part of us is being taken away. But I think that also speaks on, how we have to take care of ourselves. It's also an agreement with ourselves, with each other. to be, in a right frame of mind. And, that's something I think that we really need to think about with the youth, because so many of the youth are so angry. And this is something that is a long fight. It's not something that will be fixed quickly. And I'm getting emotional at the thought of, how many I personally experienced burnout, from these type of events. And, I don't want the younger generations who still have to, take up the mantle, who feel they have to take up this fight themselves, to experience that burnout as well. So, when I think of these agreements that we have with the treaties, I also think of how we have to make sure that agreement is, amongst each other as well, make sure we're taking care of each other as well. And that's all I have to say for that. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Kiana. That's beautiful. Juliana Peter Paul.
Yeah, so I really I can relate to both Brittany and Kiana's, experiences and what they said. I do definitely get burnout because, I see our treaties not being respected and honored. And it's disheartening because, my grandparents spoke about that growing up. And my uncles and aunts, and I get that things are changing and times are changing, but, it's it's on both sides, but we have different obligations on both sides. So, sorry, that's my dog. But when I talk about roles and responsibilities, I'm from the Bear Clan and the Beaver Clan. So the Beaver Clan are the teachers and the Bear Clan are the protectors. So I consider myself someone that's a protector of knowledge and teachings. So I'm a youth, I'm 27. I'm learning a lot. I'm just reconnecting to my culture, trying to learn the language, trying to learn the treaty rights and everything. But, you do get exhausted, and it is a lot of work to live in a society that, is not set up for Indigenous people. And that's a big part of like where I go with school and podcasting and oral history and interviewing is, kind of revitalizing our rights and our obligations to this land and this water. And like that goes among everyone, and deconstructing these misconceptions about Indigenous people as well. That's a big part of, living treaties, because for so long history has been told from the eyes of the settlers, so you can learn a lot from Indigenous people, and you can learn a lot. I think we can heal the world with Indigenous people's, ways of being. And really, it's about giving us that voice. And that's our treaty right too, is having that voice. And I really, that's all I can say right now, because I'm going to get too emotional. But yeah, I really, Walio.
Great, Waliwan. Ishbel, you ready?
Sure. So when I think of treaties, there's lots of different thoughts that come up into my mind. I think about Lawrence Bernard from Untitled, who would refuse to pay the toll when there was a toll going to Cape Breton, because he'd say, "My treaty says I may travel free." And so for years and years, he refused to pay the toll, and they finally tore the toll bridge down. Because he would kick up a stink every time he went through. And that was asserting his treaty right. And he was so clear about asserting the treaty rights and the responsibilities. And I think about, the ones and burnout, and I totally get that. I've been feeling it myself. And I can also say, as somebody who's been involved in a long time, that we do need to take care of each other and hold each other up and find those spaces to be able to heal and help each other, because it is a really long struggle. I was involved in the 1970s in fighting for freedom of religion for Indigenous people, so that when you go into a court, you could swear with the pipe, and so that sweat lodges could come into the prisons, and that elders could go into the prisons, because in the 70s, a priest and even somebody from the Baha'i faith, which I think is only maybe 60 or 70 years old, would be allowed in the prisons to comfort prisoners of their faith, but elders were not allowed in. And so that was some of the struggles that I was involved in and which have come to pass. But I also know that when the system is set up like a triangle and it's based on patriarchal, you can change policies and the government can unchange them, right? So you fight to get these things, and then the government, when people aren't looking, take it away again. And so to me, it is around everyone, because what needs to happen is a change in society. So it's no longer acceptable for Indigenous rights to be trampled on, and it's no longer acceptable for Indigenous people not to have human rights, to have rights like decent water to drink, decent water to bathe your children in. Chapel Island, the water is still brown, and you can't bathe your children in that water, and this is in Unama'gi, this is in Cape Breton. So these are some of the things that I think about. And for me, I think about we have responsibilities. As settlers, we have responsibilities because we are living in this land. And so even though my folks my people have been here since about 1768, so it's a lot of generations that have been here, I'm still a guest in this territory, and I do feel connections to this land. And it's important to support things like Alton Gas when people are trying to stop things that are hurting the environment, because treaties are about responsibilities. And I think about how life would have been if we as settlers had honored the peace and friendship treaties. Life would be very different here. It would be a real relationship. There wouldn't have been a separation. There would be much more care for the earth. There wouldn't have been things like collapses of the cod fishery and, these types of things. So we have to think of our responsibility to learn more about how do we live with this earth here, because it's also around a relationship to the land, right? The treaties were about living here on this land together. And so we need to feel, even though this is not my land is somewhere in the Highlands of Scotland, I'm living on this land and I have a responsibility to this land. And I have a responsibility to take care of this land and to value the water and to, value all the sacred things that are on this land. And I also think about the teachings from Janie Meter, who, if she was here tonight, would remind us that our original treaty is with Creator. And that's the most important treaty of all, is how Creator intended us to live here on this land. And there's lots of places, if you look at the Haudenosaunee Nation, they have the original instructions from Creator of how we are to live on this land. And in lots of ways, I think that is woven into the peace and friendship treaties, the way that we're to live together on this land. So I think it's a responsibility. And as somebody who's been working with Indigenous people since the 70s, it is around relationships, and it's around, creating those kinships. And I never liked the word allyship, because it seems like I think of World War II and the Allies, but maybe that's just me. I think of relationships and supporting each other as human beings on this earth, right? And those are just some of the thoughts that swirl around when I think of treaty. But I think as settlers, I agree, there's a real responsibility to educate our own selves. Too many times when the peace and friendship gatherings would happen at the Tatamagoush Center, which were beautiful, and to honor Gisatonamuk, who came with that idea to bring settlers and Indigenous people together and create gatherings so that his children wouldn't need to face the racism out in the world that Miigam'agan and Gisatonamuk have faced. But often it would be people, I would try and think of how can we have this knowledge and this teaching being shared without it having to be Ilnus expressing their pain, residential school survivors having to go through the trauma of sharing their pain. And so there needs to be, I think, a responsibility from the non-Indigenous people to do that teaching. And so that's a role that I have tried to take over my lifetime, is sharing the bits of knowledge that I have to break those myths like Juliana Peter-Paul talked about, and to try and open people's mind to a different worldview, because there really is a very different worldview from the Western European way of looking at life and the Indigenous. You know, one's like a pyramid and the other is a circle. One's very linear and the other is like more like a spiral, like the fiddleheads in the spring. And so it's learning to look at life in a different way. And I think if we could do that, then our relationship to each other changes and our relationship to the earth changes. Walalan Tapalat. And I'll pass it to Mig, who hopefully can speak now.
I guess I'm sorry I didn't hear everybody, and I just feel like somewhere along the way I have to review the video again, because I'd like to hear what I missed. So, you know, for me, I'm a fluent speaker too, and so when we ask questions, and when we're talking about treaties, we're looking at two worldviews, two nations coming together and making a promise that they'll build a relationship, you know. And this is the reason why the existence of the treaties to begin with, because we were a sovereign original people of the land. And so when that relationship is for sure central, and our families are how when we talk about treaties, we're talking about our families and how we live together. And I know in listening in the opening of the session tonight from our settler friends, how important it is to encourage the participants who are here with us tonight to be present, to be open, and to listen to each other. And I think those are it's important. Those are very important practices, and I think because we've not had experienced that from the Indigenous view, it's not our history. It's not been part of our reality, and it's a very sensitive topic, but a very important one to begin to talk about. So as I was about to say about the treaties and what those mean in our language, because we're talking about two worldviews, and we've been operating out of our worldview, and we've been operating and accommodating the treaty, the settler nations who are here on our homeland. So we've been outside of our long houses, outside of our tradition. But when we work outside, out of our nation, outside of our own Indigenous way of being. So, and then hearing the young leaders here who are sitting in our circle about what we weren't able to pass on, And I think this is where we're at today, is to begin to widen that door, and then not just widening, but widening it, coming recommendation and encouragement that I recommend for our settler families to truly open those and widen those doorways, and come out of them and come and experience our longhouses. And part of that is the treaties that's been here since 1700s, and it was because our ancestors were able to uphold and safeguard the land and the natural life on our homeland. And so how do we do that together as treaty people? Now we're at a space where we're all being experiencing a threat of our own lives because of climate crisis and economic crisis, and the health that experience that we're all dealing with. So coming together, it's not coming together to work from one house, one language. It's about respecting those treaties and sovereign nation of the land here, and that we've had a right to teach. And so we're still going into Western educational institutions to teach our languages, to teach what is important to us, but with not practicing from our own model of transmitting knowledge and honoring our relations, honoring our ancestors, to be able to bring the teachings of our grandmothers, and because the settler treaty holders were able to build upon the foundation of their founding fathers, and I think that's one of the things that in coming together and to talk about treaties, I think these are some of the deep core questions, and something we need to kind of revisit and rebuild. And I will continue to say this, I am a Wabanaki, I'm a longhouse person in my homeland, but I'm homeless in my homeland. There's no longhouses here. And we need to really look at the original signers to those treaties were our clans. And it was not, and that's the relationship that we're healing now is because of the treaties and because of working outside of our longhouses. We are working with an institute or a governing system that is foreign, still very much foreign to the way we would be together as clans, the way we would be working with the land. And so treaty is big, and it's we can come together and dream together about 7 generations ahead, how the kind of life that we want for our great-great-grandchildren, and to reconnect with our original mother. It's not something we just say, it's in our language. We are fortunate to have our languages because it's the languages that connect us and that have brought about resiliency. Mind you, we've endured a lot of trauma generational trauma that was spoken of. But we have an obligation to come together for the survival of all life, for our great-grandchildren. And when I say, if I was speaking in my language, when I say 7th generation great-grandchildren, it's not just a little human families. We're talking about all our clans. When we're so insistent on knowing our clan and knowing our animal spirit and knowing who our families are and keeping connected with each other. This is what treaty have been for us, on Turtle Island. We've had treaties going on with Algonquin, which is Algonquin for us, with all our relations, and our relations to Iroquois, and so on. And so all the way down to the whole Turtle Island being, anyway, I'm going off. But I just so appreciate the initial invitation and for us to start these discussions and what this means for us as Indigenous and us as settlers, as a people on Wabanaki.
Miigam'agan, I wanted to ask a question, but it's in relation to maybe something you said that really kind of triggered my thinking about, how do you say treaty in our language? And it's not a word we hear a lot, even in our language. And so I was able to look it up. And there's actually a word, and it's Lugadawagan. I don't know if it's similar in your language, but yeah, and the definition really that they talk about is the Great Peace Treaty. So Kchi Lugadawagan. Kchi is the Great Peace Treaty. And I guess I never really, we understand that our treaties are peace and friendship treaties. But when I looked that up, it refers to it, the Great Peace Treaty. How do you folks, how do the Mi'kmaq look at it in their language? In your language? Do you guys have a similar word or? Oh, maybe she can't hear me. Can you guys hear me? You can, okay. Okay, so maybe I just will leave it at that, but I just wanted to share that because it really kind of illuminates what our ancestors would have were thinking about the treaties when they kind of explained to linguists what that word meant.
She was asking a question about language
in
the treaties. Yes.
No.
Did you hear the word Miigam'agan?
Oh, can you hear me, Lisa?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I don't know what happens. I'm on my cell phone, so it was when I got a call in, I lost volume. So I was trying to listen, but I didn't want to have my ear pressed up against camera. But you were asking about the word in our language, the treaty in our language.
Yeah, the Lugadawagan, like in Wolastoqey, that's our word for it. I just was wondering if there was a similar word or something close to that in your language. Because that's the first time I really, thought about that word in terms of what it sounded like in our language. It's not a common word that gets used, which speaks to the education piece again. And I think from now on, I'm going to be using that word.
Yeah.
It's something
for us, we would be in reference to treaty is when we make that agreement, it's like deployment or it's an agreement now that we come to believe these arrangements, of being together we've agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are it's already been incorporated in our language, and those first promise, the presence of that when we say Depludum is also like what including our ancestors, our acknowledging all life, all the source of life that is responsible for our good life, for our existence, keeping us alive, which is our clans, and so I somewhere along the way, just like what's happening with today, we're being severed from the land, and that we're operating from a language that is linear as opposed to our languages, which were very multidimensional when we would address both all life. It was, and I think the young people are kind of coming back to those terms when we start hearing binary, non-binary, binary. I'm just learning all that, but this is ancestral worldview or ancestral way of being coming back in different terms. And I'm really hopeful when as I'm being taught about the new terms, and so I think the conversations that the young people are moving forward with is it's all coming back, incorporating what our ancestral world view, our way of being was. And the deeper we keep encouraging people to look deep into their ancestral ways, and just as Ishbel, who is a settler, acknowledges that, and when she's making those connections to her ancestral connections, and she can relate. And I think the deeper we go to those, making those connections, because this is where all our identity comes from. Our ancestors and Indigenous people across the land have been encouraging human beings to connect to their ancestors, to connect to the land, to learn from their Indigenous languages. And so when we begin as treaty holders, we have a big responsibility first before we start to make recommendations. We need to first go deep within us and our ancestral connections. And the deeper we go in that root system of our ancestors, we're all going to find ourselves in that space, because we are being and have been taught by the same mother. And so we all hold the same, our ancestors have held the same reference to music, which was what we opened with in the settler Christian way and in the Indigenous way. And so every Indigenous people in the world have a drum, music, and a way of celebrating and honoring food, traditional food. So I think when we go deep in that space, sacred space, we begin to understand. I feel the treaties are alive, much more rooted and much more alive in that space.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I want to share.
The other thing that gets me thinking about when I was thinking about treaties too, I mean, I know it's the wampum and the Turo wampum, really, that the symbolism with the Turo wampum and how the coexistence, and the respecting and recognizing the differences and non-interference. I think that really, those words and language is so powerful. I think it's so powerful, and the language we choose to use is really powerful. And I think we have to think about the words that we choose, and it really got me thinking about the coexistence of the Turo wampum and how being unmolested, as it states in our treaties, in our peace and friendship treaties, to be able to hunt and fish and to live as in our Indigenous way of living, unmolested. And I think that is the essence of what our treaties talk about. And when we're not able to do that, that's when the relationship starts to fall apart, right? And I think that's really we keep weaving into and out of this situation of when our people try to practice their treaty rights, or assert their treaty rights. That's when the issues or the troubles start. So, I mean, it's like, where can we get to a place where, people stand in solidarity with our people and say, no, it can't just always be us. And I know that you have, like, over the years, and we all have had non-Indigenous people standing by our side and saying, no, we have to respect the relationship. We have to respect the treaty. So, I mean, it's, I don't know, like somebody was saying, like, it's a long-term thing, and it's always something that we're always going to have to be aware of, mindful of, but most of and I think the biggest thing to all of this is, and if you've all said it, is education, is making sure people are aware of what is in those treaties. Like, I've learned about other treaties that I have no clue. The Treaty of Utrecht, treaty of this, treaty of that. Like, I can't even remember what they're about, but I just remember learning about them in school and thinking, why am I learning this stuff? Like, I have no idea. And, and then come to find out we have our own treaties. Why wouldn't we learning about that when we should have been learning about those things? And I think that's, to me, is, that's where it will become part of our everyday life. And, I think that's the biggest part, is like, even our own people don't understand our treaties. And I think that's where we have to start and empower ourselves. I think that, to me, there was a word that really struck me when we were talking as well, that I can't see it here now, but just kind of the idea that, we have to assert our rights. Like, it's always a matter of us having to assert our rights. And when, I don't know if we can ever imagine a day when we don't have to do that anymore, that our rights will always be respected and honored. I think that might be a little utopian thinking, but, you got to stay a little hopeful sometimes. And I heard the young people talking about the trauma and the burnout and the associated with having to try to assert rights. And I think that's, again, something that, being Indigenous is part of our reality. But if I think we can get a mass of people that have the same will to assert our rights and our treaties. And I like that term. I guess there's a whole education modules that exists now called We Are All Treaty People. And I don't know where that is right now in terms of being implemented within the public school system. But there are modules and things that have been developed for education. But I don't know where that is at this point, but maybe somebody else will know. But yeah, so much to talk about in this topic. Like I didn't even realize, like, you know, when I got thinking about it all, like really how much, you know, our lives get impacted by this discussion. And in my lifetime and over the years, and, you know, trying to assert our rights.
So Jane Meter, I think, is part of that group that's been creating that curriculum.
Yeah.
And they are starting to roll it out in Nova Scotia. It's in sort of the higher grades that they're rolling it out, but the hope is that it'll come down, and she has created curriculum for the different age levels. So that's starting to roll out now.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anybody else want to add or comment on? I guess we still have time.
When Miigam'agan talks about connecting to your own ancestors, this is something I realized, I would say, in the process of like transitioning into like diving into my own culture. I grew up westernized, and I grew up thinking like that I was white. I didn't really have an understanding that I was also Indigenous, because I lived with my white family. And I noticed when I was young, I was very like driven to wanting to go international, wanting to work international, wanting to learn about international cultures. I was really drawn to that. And it kind of felt like there was something missing. Like I was searching for something, but I didn't know what that thing was. And it was only until I started learning about my own culture that I understood that my body and my spirit recognized that there was something missing where my mind didn't know. I wasn't aware. I wasn't consciously aware. And when I started connecting to my culture, that like part of myself that I felt like I was searching for, that was missing, that I was like looking into other cultures for, I started to feel that fulfillment while I was looking into my own ancestry, into my own family. As I'm still going through these processes, I started feeling that fulfillment and the want to extend outside of myself to international grounds, to different cultures. That completely stopped. And in sharing that, I find it kind of gave me a new awareness and a new understanding that, you know, if everybody in the world took the time to really look at their ancestry and to really look back at their roots and understand where they come from, and like look back into the culture and like reconnecting to themselves. Like, Meg, you're totally right about how, you know, it's such a core part of knowing what your identity is from knowing where you're from. And I just think if we're in a world where people were to connect back to their own roots, I think, like, you know, that's when we can really live in harmony. Because when people are in dissonance within their own spirit, when they're not connected, they're floating, and they're trying to grasp onto things that they think that they want, but it's not what they really need. And another thing that I also wanted to say, because I noticed this again within myself when I was reconnecting, it's like you're remembering that you have these responsibilities. So like living as a westernized woman, as I thought that was only what I was, I didn't know I had certain responsibilities. Like I didn't feel like I had responsibilities in the same way as now living, you know, within more of an Indigenous lens. I'm realizing like I have responsibilities to this land. I have responsibilities to my community, to my culture. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out what those things are while I'm connecting to my own spirit and to the people around me. And I feel like whenever you know, have that awareness, then comes respect. So like you self-connect to your family, to yourself. You start becoming aware of these responsibilities that you have. And I feel like when we're all in that space, then you can really cultivate like a foundation of like, I can respect another person because I can understand that like, you know, I have my own responsibilities in this life. And that person has also their own responsibilities to their life, to their own unique background. And I feel like when we're in those spaces, I feel like it's just kind of easy to understand when we go on these similar paths and we go through like these similar hardships to get there. So I feel like just that part that you were talking about, Meg, like just really triggered like something that I learned. And I think that's so special. And I feel like not a lot of people know that. Like I didn't know that for most of my life. I didn't think, you know, that I was actually missing like a part of my identity in that way until now, until I became aware. Another thing that I find always comes into my topics of conversations, like now that we're speaking about treaties, like, man, I keep thinking about the medicine wheel. That teaching like keeps coming up when I'm talking about different things. And when thinking about treaties and like, you know, we're two nations supposedly like having this agreement to live peacefully and in harmony together and in respecting both of our differences. I think back to like, you know, at least the way I was taught the medicine wheel teachings is that, you know, we were four nations put onto this earth with all these unique abilities and all these unique responsibilities. And, you know, when we come together on the earth, sharing our resources and sharing our unique abilities with one another creates and cultivates, you know, these connections and these relationships. And they're supposed to be reciprocal for them to work, for us to feel like, you know, we're living in harmony and to live in peace. But if we don't have that reciprocity between all four nations, in this instant we're talking about two, but I mean, we know we're more than, you know, two living within at least Canada and the US. If we're not living within these reciprocal relationships, that harmony and that peace is not going to follow through. There's not a logical like connection as to how that's supposed to be. So I just like talking about the medicine wheel too, because I think that's so important to just kind of be reminded of, at least when I think about the intentions of like having that teaching. Lisa, you were mentioning about how some people say like when they assert their treaty rights, that's when issues come about. And again, like it comes back to education. Like I feel like most individuals who aren't aware of treaties and then they hear like, oh, like I have treaty rights and they don't know what that is. I feel like it's always the fear that comes up, the fear of like not knowing, the fear of like not sounding like the educated one. Like I feel like for some reason like those fears are always the first thing that comes up rather than the curiosity or the wanting to understand. And like that gap is the education. And I just find that so crazy how like education is such a big foundation for everything in our life. Like if settlers were educated on like our past traumas with the 60s scoop and residential schools and Indian day schools, like if they were educated on that, they would have an understanding. They could, you know, develop some compassion. But without that, there's this fear of the unknown, and that always comes up first. And I just find it so frustrating and so sad and like very irritating. But then again, I know that comes from like the government. If we look throughout our history, like this is, it's all planned by the government. And I think we need to start reconnecting to like us as people instead of, the government. If we just talk to each other and have people listen, we just need to be listened to. But we also need to have these conversations. If we're not going to have these hard conversations, nothing's going to be done, But yeah, I think I might stop there because I'm just going to keep like going off on it. But I think a really good note to leave off on, like Lisa is talking about like the Great Peace Treaty, how that's the translation for you in your language. And when I think about that, I still think about the medicine wheel, like deep down, we all want peace. Like we don't want to go through the hardships. We don't want to feel the pain. Like we all want to live peacefully. Deep down, it's what we want. But it's our traumas that just kind of get in the way for us moving forward. And that just kind of reflects on how much healing that we need within our culture. But there are many other cultures that need healing because they're so disconnected from their background that they don't even know who they are. And I find that's the saddest thing because I've been there. And now I'm on this journey of learning who I am again.
So I can echo what you were saying in the importance of needing to learn your own culture and your own ways, and also to learn about how you became disconnected, right? So for me, I know the people from the Highlands of Scotland, and about the Colonial War that happened for about 500 years before the folks came over here, right? And the way that it worked to break it down so that they could learn how do you destroy the traditional communities. And you can see how that pattern just continued over here, right? Because they learned what you need to do is go into a community, give this big family lots of stuff, give this big family nothing. And that's what they did in the Highlands, getting people to fight against each other, right? And causing that disconnection. And interestingly enough, in the Highlands, it was the women who fought to the very end. All the guns had been taken, everything had been taken, but it was the women that were clinging on and holding to the land. But were taken to the shores and loaded on ships to come here. But that divide and conquer was what they learned on how to destroy the traditional system. And so you can go to any First Nations community right across this country, and there are always two families that don't like each other. And nobody even knows why or even knows how it started. It started way back when the colonialization started here because they learned how to do that really effectively in the Highlands of Scotland, how to destroy the people so that they would hate and the different clans would hate each other, right? And when I first started working with Indigenous folks back in my 20s, right? And one woman who I was working with, whose family ended up adopting me, kept on saying, but you see the world the way that we do. How is that? How is that possible? And I, somewhere inside me, I might get emotional. When I remember being in grade 1 and looking outside my window and seeing the spirit in the trees. And this teacher was telling me that these things did not have spirit. Luckily, I refused to believe her. And I just looked around and I thought, how sad that no one else sees the spirit in the water or the trees. But I didn't realize it was connected to my culture, but I knew it was a part of who I was. And I was so drawn. And when I was little, I kept asking my parents if I could learn my language, to be able to speak Gaelic. And they said, Ishbel, it's a dead language. There's no use to it, because they had been teased going to school because they could only speak Gaelic, and they had been ridiculed as being stupid. And so they didn't want me to face that. So they refused for me to be able to learn my own language, right? So all these traumas that you're right, but so many of my own people have completely forgotten about the impact of colonialization, have completely forgotten about being stripped from the land, forgotten that we're completely a communal people. There is no word for ownership in my language. There is no word for my, not even for when you say your daughter. You're describing your relationship. She doesn't belong to me. She belongs to Creator, right? So when you look at these traditional teachings, and when you go back to them all, and then you see the trauma and you see how different people reacted to it. I mean, my God, I don't understand MacDonald. He was the first prime minister of Canada, right? Or wasn't he? And he started the residential school whole thing, right? So what trauma had he gone through and his family gone through in the Highlands of Scotland, where the boys were ripped off and sent to private schools to become English like? Right? And to give up the language and to get ahead, you had to deny all of your traditions, right? But you can see these things are coming back too and becoming stronger. And I'm connected to people in Scotland who are working on bringing back the traditions, and they're working on the streets of Glasgow with heroin addicts and people who are severe alcoholics to bring the traditions back as a way to heal that intergenerational trauma that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so the story is really similar. And the people that I feel sorry for, I think, are people who are such a mixture that they say, but who am I? Because I'm such a mixture. But I can't help, and I may be totally wrong, thinking that somewhere in your spirit, there's a connection of where you feel connected to. Whatever that is, that's who you are. That's, that's the gift that Creator gave you. And that's the connection that you have. And I think you're right. If we're all living that original instruction way, then it makes working together as treaty just so much easier. And it is about having to decolonialize ourselves and step out of the colonial systems, because like I said before, you can change policies, but until a wider group of people in this society are looking at a different lens and a different worldview, it's too easy for someone else to get elected in and they just take all the rights away again and you're back to square one. There has to be enough people that stand up and say, no, we're not living this way. We're going to protect our future generations. We're going to stop climate change. And I think that's all a part of it. And I also think of the wampum belts. We just did a wampum workshop and we're bringing back those skills, and people were creating their wampums. And it was so powerful. And I think of that wampum that was created about the Catholic Church. And the church picture, the door is open. And I'm like looking at that and thinking, how did these elders have that much, these ancestors have that much wisdom, that when they created that wampum, the door's open, which means you can go in and you can come out. That's so beautiful, and there's just so much teachings in those wampums about how we should live our lives. And, we're certainly hoping to be able to do more wampum, creating more wampum. There was a beautiful wampum a young woman created about Boat Harbor, and the story came to her as she was planning her wampum belt about how beautiful it was, and it was their grocery store and their everything. And then it got polluted by the pulp mill, and now they're working to bring it back. So it's like she said, it's a mirror image with many tears in between. And that's the wampum she's created to tell that story. And it's just, it's beautiful. Alalan, Papalat.
I just wanted to invite Kiana and Juliana to share. I think we got a high sign of our getting close to the end, and I wanted to open that up for them too.
I think I'm at the listening aspect of my night. I can't find any words to contribute to it. I'm really appreciative of everything that you guys all have to say, and I'm glad to be here tonight. I really am. I feel good. So thank you guys for all your words.
Yeah, I'm a very active listener. I enjoy listening to conversations, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this conversation. And I just want to kind of say it one more time that, putting and allowing Indigenous people to have that honor and respect within our own treaty rights and our own ways of being is important with living treaties. So, that goes with sovereignty. That goes in every aspect of sovereignty for me. Being able to hunt and fish, drink clean water, have access to good food. Those are all part of treaty rights, and just having that to like reaffirm and leave with everyone. That's a right for everyone to have as well. And prior to colonialism, there was no struggles for our people, and we're trying to adapt now, and we're moving forward, and we want to live in peace and friendship. And we can only do that if people are willing to work with that relationship and build upon that relationship. So I want to say Walalio, and thank you guys for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you. I just want to check with Miigam'agan, Lisa, or actually anyone, if there was any closing comments you wanted to make. I don't want to cut anyone off. A huge thank you to everyone.
I was just going to say that what Juliana said was perfect to end, I thought, with, if people are willing. I think that's so true. There has to be a willingness. And I think that if we can start there, if people have the will, I think a lot can be accomplished. So thank you for that wisdom. Chibaliu and Psidewen. Thank you all.
Thank you. I really do want to express enormous gratitude for this evening. It's been a beautiful, speaking for myself, to listen in, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more tomorrow. So as we close off for tonight, a reminder that we will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. For another session, similar, hopefully just going a little deeper on some of these questions. We do want to, of course, acknowledge there's many folks in the virtual room here tonight that we haven't heard from, and we would like to hear thoughts and questions. So what we're planning to do is open our time tomorrow with a few minutes in very small groups, so that everyone will just have a chance to share a few thoughts with new or old friends or neighbors. And then from that, there may be questions that we want to pose to the circle, and there'll be an opportunity to do that in the chat. The reason I'm mentioning this all now is simply so that overnight, as you're reflecting on what you've heard tonight or your own experiences and questions, you might think just one or two things that you want to bring out or share tomorrow. Or if there's a question that you have, something you're wondering about or curious about, that you can bring that in the morning. And we'd be really honored to hear that too. So that is at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'm just checking my notes. I think maybe one of the ways I'll just, what I'll share right now is this. So this is from earlier this evening, our word cloud about treaty. And we may want to add to this tomorrow or as our time goes, but it's a little glimpse of where our whole group was at the beginning of this evening. And I'll just share this as we close for the night. Maybe I'll just offer a very brief word of prayer as we close. Simply this, that the Creator will accept our gratitude for the gifts of this evening and the relationships that are growing among us, and to grant each person here peace throughout the night. Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.